Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shay with Amos. I'm your host, Jacob Gorgie, and joining me today is, I almost said Mr. Jimmy Moawad.
Sure, we can be Mr. Today, why not?
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm phenomenal. So, that was horrible time tea. Typically, with these interviews, I just say, let's start from the beginning. And the beginning means when you come from Egypt to America. But I think, and we're gonna reference this, I think you're our first guest who was actually born not only in America, but in Chicago. Like,
oh, interesting, maybe.
Right? I think
Yeah,
so.
sure.
Unless John Abaid was.
I don't know.
I don't remember. We'll have to check.
We'll have to
But you're in Good Samaritan, right?
No, Chicago, University of Chicago.
Okay, so up the street that way. But yeah. So that's cool. So you're our first guest to do that. Now you were born at a time where it was a transitional period for the St. Mark congregation. They were transitioning from the Roselle Church into what is now St. Mark's Church in Burridge, the actual built church. So a lot of your childhood was actually spent in St. Mark when it was brand new.
Yeah, so my childhood was 1980s and into the 90s.
Yeah.
And you're right, there were a bunch of things that were new when I was really little that now I don't think of them as having been new because that was how I grew up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I still remember the day when we moved into the new St. Mark Church here in Burridge. It was brand new. It was a feast day. I was just a few years old. I don't remember much at all, but I just remember like it was a big significant event.
Yeah.
So that was new. And, the priest we had when I was growing up was Abuna Shenouda. He was new here. We had a priest before that, Abuna Moros, that had passed away. He baptized me, but I don't remember him. I mean, he died when I was very, very small, like 1 year old. So, my childhood was kind of, I guess you could say, a new time period. We had our own property, our own church. That wasn't, something we were renting or buying from, some previous congregation or anything. So it was finally like our own Coptic thing. Yeah.
It's like a home. It's like your own home.
It's true.
And it's funny because during this time we were also seeing, new services basically be developed, right? There was something you mentioned to me in particular. I forgot what was the name of the magazine?
Oh, Voice of Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell
Voice
me
of the
about
Lord
that.
Jesus.
Yeah. We'll throw up pictures for you guys, but.
Yeah. No, so actually it was great. When I was a kid, I remember looking forward to this magazine. It was issued every 2 months, I think. And, my mother was involved in putting together things, and Uncle Gergis Risk was very involved in printing things. And it started out, I think, as a magazine just for our congregation, like a children's magazine. It had some stories in it. It had a section about Know Your Church. And then there was some puzzles and like a Bible contest. And you could fill out the Bible contest and then submit it. For those of us here at church, we just hand it in to like our Sunday school teacher. Mm-hmm. And then in the next issue, like people would have, like there'd be prizes for some winners. Like if you got all the answers right, then you were put in like a little pool and they'd pick some winners. And this service grew, and soon we were mailing out issues of the magazine to churches all over the whole country. And I think even later all over like the English-speaking world, like, Canada, Australia, maybe UK.
Yeah.
It became like a big service. And I'm sure a lot of people my age growing up in the church remember coming like on Saturdays, and we would collate pages. Or you don't know what the word collate is, but we had like a big printing press.
Yeah.
It's not like today's machines where you print something and it comes out in order.
Yeah.
You print a bunch of like page 1, a bunch of page 2, a bunch of page 3, and so someone's got to manually put those together in order, and then staple them, and then they get put in envelopes and get mailed out. And so there was like a whole project like every couple of months to put all these together. And the church actually printed lots and lots of other things too. It wasn't just these magazines. There were all kinds of books that you see that we're printing, and still that printing service goes on. Uncle Raheem, right, is still taking care of printing services in the church.
Yeah, actually, we had Uncle Malad on season 1. That's an old episode. Make sure you guys go back and. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, the camera's turning slowly. Make sure you guys go back and check out that episode. But his books were printed here, Christianity 101, and I think there was other translations he did of Isaiah. Or not translation, I forget what they were. I have to look back at the episode, but I have them. But that's interesting because this magazine, I never heard of this magazine until you mentioned it to me. But then again, I think the magazine I grew up with was like the Maharagan, Karaz, like, like the books. Those are like the ones I remember, which I think they still do to this day. Now, in the topic of growing up here, you were a part of one of the first Coptic American generations, minus the people who came in the 40s. We pretend New Jersey doesn't exist for a second, okay? but especially in Chicago, you were part of that generation where like the first generation Coptic Americans. So, as you grew up, did you ever feel a split or like a disconnect between kind of the two identities, being Coptic and being American?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me growing up, right, the weekends were full of being at church. I mean, you guys know my parents. We were always very involved, and so our weekends were very filled with being at church, just church services, and Saturdays we would do other activities. We'd have like Nedwood days every so often, and so that was like one chunk of my life, yes. And then there was the other days of the week where you're at school, and I guess for me, you're right. They felt like two different places.
Did you feel like you were flipping between identities? Like as in like when I'm around my Coptic, like there's almost like an embrace. And when you're not around Coptic people, it's more sheltered and the American side comes out? Or do you feel like just one identity dominated over the other, and as you grew, it kind of shifted?
That's an interesting question. Well, so for me, like when I was at church, I always really liked it because I felt comfortable at church. And maybe that's because, like in school for me, like, I don't know, it wasn't a comfortable environment. I guess maybe because I don't know, I grew up at a time period in the U.S. where maybe it's different now. People kind of embrace diversity more. Like, I don't know, I don't feel like diversity was a thing to be embraced back then or something like that. Everyone was trying to blend in. And I always felt like at school, I was trying to figure out like how to blend in.
Yeah.
And I felt a little bit out of place. And I was like almost embarrassed of my, the fact that I'm like children of immigrants. And, I have this Coptic identity that seems to dominate my like weekend time. And my church is a long, place with these long services and it's weird and whatever else. So I guess, yeah, in some ways, like when I was at school, I felt out of place. Whereas at church, I felt like really comfortable. And everyone at church was like me, and it was a more comfortable crowd.
So then, this is interesting. I'm interested to hear your answer on this one. How did you explain Easter to them?
Easter?
Yeah, because I remember when I was like in middle school, high school, especially like early high school, I just didn't tell them. like they would ask, where were you? And I was like, oh, yeah, obviously my mom would like call me out and stuff, but like, I would say, oh yeah, I was sick or something. Like I wouldn't go into it. So I'm wondering, like growing up, did you run into that problem, or is it more of like?
Well, you say Easter. Now, Easter is fine because Easter, the other kids at school know what Easter is.
Yeah.
Sure, the date is different, but that seemed easier to explain. Like on the topic of Easter, probably the more, like the thing that comes up is like, why are you missing so much of that whole week before? Yeah. Like you have church again? Like, like people didn't like get that. Yeah. Like you're at church all day on Good Friday. Like those are the parts that like people didn't understand.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember, I think at one point I was in a Catholic school, like I was elementary, and that's when I was beginning to like, learn like what Good Friday is and that we fast all day. And I remember I was like flexing on like the other students, like, oh yeah, we fast all day for our Good Friday. And but it's interesting because that was a Catholic school, and that was similar, but there's a lot of differences too. But I remember that was a part of when my Coptic identity was developing. That when I was younger, I took pride in. And then as I got older, I was like, oh wait, So then, what was the turning point where you began to, I guess, feel more comfortable in your identity outside of?
Yeah, so like it's interesting what you're just saying. Like you're saying like you were proud of the fact that like you your services were long and you fasted a lot and so on. Like as a child, I don't remember ever being like proud. But you're right. Like later, maybe in somewhere in the college time frame, probably. I think I sort of realized like what we have at church here is so rich and so special, and it's just something that I should be so proud of. Like it's just we have such a rich history, and we should absolutely embrace it, and make people interested in it and be proud of that. Like it was just such a nice thing, and I don't know why, but I didn't appreciate or realize that as a child, and probably somewhere in like the post-college time, definitely like they like clicked. And it's like, this is something to be proud of.
What clicked? Was it the realization of the history, or was it? Because I had a moment where it did click.
Maybe part of it was in college. I went to University of Illinois, and so in college, I did a reasonable job of trying to be home a decent amount, like back up in the Chicago area to come to like St. Mark Church. But probably at least every other week I was probably down in Champaign, and so on those weeks I would see other like churches. Like sometimes I'd attend. There's a Catholic church right across the street on the from the dorms. Sometimes I get a ride to like the Greek Orthodox church, or later there was like an Antiochian church, or sometimes I'd pop into just any church on campus. And I think seeing the other churches, maybe for me at least, it's like, oh, like, sure, it's nice going to any church, like, but like we have something that's a little bit unique and special.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's funny because when I heard the Gregorian liturgy in college, I think it was the economies of your mercy. I don't know why, for some reason that like...
Yeah, it's a strange phrasing.
I know, and it was just like, who else says that, But, I mean, I'm only mentioning that because today we actually did pray
the Gregorian liturgy.
Yeah,
yes.
but it was like, that was like, I remember the moment where everything like clicked in. And then do you feel like also being educated, because I'm trying to remember, because I grew up, we had servants prep, we had, I don't want to say more, because I don't necessarily think there was more. I think it's been about the same, but in high school I was learning about like the councils, the schisms, and all kind of not complicated theological history, but theological history that is kind of difficult to explain sometimes. So did you feel like that added education? I mean, I'm assuming you had that when you were like around my age, like servants prep. Did that exist yet or no?
We didn't have a formal servants prep program yet.
Okay.
So there was a more, informal program without like a class structure, right?
Yeah.
The head of the servants would give you some things to read and assign you to a class and so on.
Yeah.
So no, actually we didn't have like a formal servants prep class like we have today.
Okay. So then did you feel like as you learned more, it kind of started that click to happen, or was it more of just seeing other...
I think just seeing, for me, just seeing other backgrounds, other kids, other, where people are coming from, right? You go to college, you're talking with all kinds of other kids in a more casual setting, and like I was saying, like my high school years, I went to school. If I was in like a sport like soccer, like I went to soccer, I went home. Like I don't know, I didn't spend tons and tons of time with other school kids. But then in college, you're spending a lot of time for me, I was spending a lot of time with all kinds of kids. And, I always kind of said, like, there's like a third. A third of the students were, Christian and actually like went to a church. And like a third of them were like not Christian, or were Christian but didn't really go to church. And then the other third like weren't really Christian either. They just kind of didn't pay attention to anything. Yeah. Maybe. Right? And then of course that's a really rough generalization. But seeing that, and then seeing like different ways people might practice their Christianity and other faiths, you kind of get exposed to all that, and it starts to make you appreciate the way you grew up.
And then when everything clicked, when that appreciation happened, or not saying that you weren't appreciating before, but did you find yourself wanting to invest more time into like further appreciation? Like back to kind of my instance, the when I had that click happen, all of a sudden my interest in things like hymnology just skyrocketed, right? Like where I understood like kind of like the passion for it, right? And also my interest in like things like apologetics, things like that, stuff that I wouldn't be interested in otherwise. but all for a desire to kind of further appreciate. Did you find yourself doing something similar where once you kind of understood and really embrace that Coptic identity, did you find yourself really looking to devour more of the Coptic
yeah,
church?
actually, I don't know. I don't know if I did, but
Okay.
I did find myself where if there were things needed in the church, there was a service needed. Like, it's like, yes, I'll do that. I'll help. Like, someone needs to do that. And I don't know that there were a lot of people that sort of didn't stay involved, right? So you sort of feel like, well, I should stay involved. Like, this is, the church is something that needs, people like me around and involved, and me and my friends should be here, and we should be, taking on after our parents' generation, right? Our parents' generation was like the immigrant generation, and we grew up here, and someone's got to keep carrying that.
Yeah. Did you find yourself interpreting liturgy different after the fact from compared to before? I'm sorry, these are like a lot of one-off, but because
I don't think I appreciated liturgy until many years later.
Really?
Later in my adult life, yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. What
For me, I don't know.
Oh, really? Okay.
I just think even back in the, college, post-college days, the liturgy was probably somewhere I went and stood, and it felt kind of long, and when's it going to end? Whereas I think as years went by, I gradually, it was a very gradual process, started to appreciate liturgy more and more.
Oh, I see.
But back when I was in my 20s, I'm not sure if I appreciated liturgy the way I did later. I don't know.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And actually on the topic of going on,
Yeah.
you now have kids.
Uh-huh.
And you're a parent.
I have 2 kids.
You have 2 kids, yes. I don't know how specific you want me to get. It's going on the internet. But as you were raising kids, and I think the oldest one is going to be like a senior now.
He's a
Right?
senior, they're both in high school.
Yeah.
Senior and a sophomore.
Right.
Yeah.
So, did you find yourself as a parent trying to take preventative measures to kind of keep them from having this? I don't want to say a crisis. It might have been a crisis. Would you classify your thing as an identity crisis, or more of just trying to figure out how to balance or embrace?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a crisis, but certainly growing up, I didn't properly embrace my Coptic identity like I should have.
Yeah.
Right. I should have been much more proud of that and willing to expose it to, like my school friends, right? Any of my non-Coptic friends. So you're saying, like, as a parent,
Do you find yourself trying to encourage your kids to take more pride in being Coptic, or is it one of those things where it might be better if they, click on their own? So I guess really what I'm asking is, as a parent, have you tried to make that click happen, or try to take steps to make it happen, or is it more of we'll give them the foundation and they'll...
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I don't know how much I've thought about that.
Oh.
But I think as a parent, one thing I've tried to make sure of is that my kids are comfortable with who they are at school, and at in the church setting, that they know why the Coptic Orthodox Church is important, that they that they are involved in school, are involved in church, both. Because actually, that's another thing I think about when I was growing up. I wasn't really that involved in many school things, partly because, like we were saying, we were at church so much. Mm-hmm. And was that bad? I don't know. No, I guess maybe not. I don't know that I necessarily felt like I was missing things I really wanted to do. But it might have been nice to be more involved. Maybe we swung too far in the opposite direction. I don't know. Yeah. But for my kids, they've been very involved in all kinds of school things. Then I look back and I wasn't involved in any of these things when I was in school. Yeah. So that's a difference. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. The only reason why I ask is I've actually been asked that question before, and I was like, what? Dude, I'm 22. I don't know why you're asking this question, but it is interesting because as the children of immigrants have children, they have the essence of what's Coptic American, it's not only bound to change, but I wonder how that identity will be passed on.
Yeah.
Something.
Well, and what that identity is will change.
Yeah.
Because for me, my two parents are both Egyptian.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess in the case of my kids, my wife is Coptic Egyptian, and so my kids are both Egyptian. But certainly I have lots of friends who maybe only one parent is Egyptian. So their children are Coptic, but they're half Egyptian.
Yeah.
In a generation, maybe you have Coptic kids that are a quarter Egyptian, right? So as time goes on,
Yeah.
the Egyptian part of being Coptic is going to fade away. That's just natural. So like, that's actually something to think about, is like, what is important about being Coptic?
Yeah.
Is being Egyptian important? Maybe not.
I've been saying this for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because in America, Egyptian and Coptic got intertwined, but
Right.
partially because there was none of us.
Right.
It was like 5 people.
That's insane. Like,
like,
at some point, everyone that's in the Coptic church here, not everyone, but maybe just about everyone, is like 100% Egyptian. But like you said, like as time goes on and generations go by, that shifts. It's not like that anymore.
Yeah, and I think what ends up happening too is that, it becomes so ingrained in culture that, I might get in trouble for this one, but I think sometimes we miss out on the other parts of being Coptic. That is more than just kind of like the culture. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, what do you mean by other parts? I think you're right, but what
like
do you
like
think, what do you say other parts?
like for example, what I was talking about, like the economy of your mercies.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah, the richness
church,
of like the liturgy
the
itself.
spirituality. Yeah. And I think part of it is because also a lot of people are just growing up in it.
Yeah.
So they're so used to hearing it. Like I remember someone was converting, and I was kind of helping with it, and I brought him to Tasbeh.
Okay.
And mind you, it was like me and a few other people doing it. It wasn't a great Tasbeh. I remember apologizing, like, hey, this is not, like, here, I'll send you a recording or something, right? And I remember they told me, like, oh no, I was crying. Because they never heard Tasbeh before. And I'd never felt like anything like this. And I was like, and it really made me think, like,
Yeah, it's something unique we have.
well, yeah, and that we're so ingrained, I always like the joke that we're like,
We take it for granted a little bit.
we're the trust fund kids of like spirituality.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
like really, we grew up with such richness, but we never. I don't want to say we never take time to step back and look, but it's more because it's so habitual
Yeah.
that we just. It takes time for us to really step back and look, and I think because we're so. I don't want to say obsessed preserving it, because this show is literally a show about preserving, Coptic heritage, Coptic culture. But I guess more the fear of losing it has kind of blinded us to, not blinded us, because it's a little too harsh, but it's made us kind of lose sight sometimes of how truly deeply spiritual we are, But anyway, sorry for the monologue, but that kind of leads me to my outlook question.
Okay.
Which is the single most important outlook question we will ever ask on the show. There's no pressure. What advice would you give to people, to future generations, who will be dealing with the same difficulty of embrace between being Coptic and being American?
Okay, good question. Well, I'm maybe going to answer this in a slightly different way than the way you're phrasing it even, but like for us in the church trying to embrace our identity, actually the most important thing is that we're children of God, like, and Jesus Christ came for us. And like, that's like the most important thing. And like the church is a really useful tool. And our Coptic Orthodox Church specifically has such great, rich things in it that are all tools for us to help us. And right, maybe one person relates to the fact that we have like Tasbeh, like you're talking about Tasbeh. Maybe that for another person that doesn't click, but another person really likes liturgy. Another person really likes, reading the writings of early church fathers, or the sacraments are a really important thing. Like there's so much there. So like that's the next piece of the puzzle, right? But I think just my outlook, I guess, for everyone would be like, realize that we're special because we're children of God, and Jesus Christ like loves me, and then figure out like how we have a really special church that has so many tools for us to build off of that.
That is, you know, I said no pressure, but you answered like there was pressure. It was a really good answer. That's all I have.
Great.
Yeah, no, this is one of the first interviews where I actually really related to, because like I said, I've dealt with this, and the reason why this is the most single important question we had to ask is because this show's primary purpose is to archive all the Coptic history and the immigration for the next generation, you know. So that's why this is so important. But anyways, I've rambled on long enough. Thank you all so much for coming, or for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you, Jimmy, for coming on. I really do appreciate it. This has been amazing.
Thanks for chatting.
No problem.
Does the camera work now?
I think so. Is it working?
Now.
Okay, good. I should be looking over there.
That camera. Are we
one?
done?
Both on this camera.
We're both on this camera?
Oh, so don't look over there.
Just continue.
It's just
continue.
Do the outro.
Okay.
There's an outro still?
Yeah. No, I'm not done. Hold on. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for watching. God bless, and good night.